Welcome to Infection and Immunity Evidence Explained, a Doherty Institute podcast. I'm Rebecca Elliott. This is part 2 of our podcast on Buruli ulcer. If you haven't already, I suggest you go back and listen to part 1 where I spoke to University of Melbourne Professor Tim Stinear, who told us about the latest groundbreaking findings into Buruli ulcer and the flesh-eating bacteria that cause this infection. Let's get straight into part 2. Joining me is Mornington Peninsula resident Ella Crofts, who contracted a Buruli ulcer at age 13 and has a very unique story to tell. Ella, thanks so much for joining me on Infection and Immunity Evidence Explained.
Thanks for having me.
So you contracted the Buruli ulcer in 2017 when you were just 13 years old. Tell me about your experience.
So before I contracted it, I'd never heard of it, did not know it was a thing. I had no idea that it existed. And basically one day I was on a holiday with my parents and I was complaining. I was like, oh, my knee hurts. But it wasn't too bad. Like I was fine. It just ached a little. And Dad was sort of like, oh, suck it up. And basically like around 2 months later, the skin just started falling off. So it was quite brutal, really. I was sort of like, it was swollen. It was inflamed. It was like a soccer ball. And we went to a bunch of skin disease experts and stuff, and everyone just sort of said it was cellulite, but it wasn't. And my dad was
cellulitis?
Cellulitis, yes, that's the one. And my dad was the one who thought, oh, it's perhaps the Buruli ulcer. So he asked them to do a punch biopsy, and it came back positive. So from there, it was basically just a bunch of antibiotics and then surgeries, and it was in and out of hospitals to get it sorted out.
That's a lot for a 13-year-old to have to deal with. How did you deal with it?
I missed out on a fair bit of school, so I kind of missed out on my entirety of year 8, at like the whole of terms 2 and 3. I felt super lonely. I couldn't do any of my hobbies. All of my things are outdoors and active and movement, and I basically lost all of my movement. Like walking was really hard. I'd just spend all day like sitting or lying just because walking was so painful. So it was actually really hard. And I sort of just had to find other things to fill my time, which was mostly like sedimentary activities because I couldn't really do anything else.
So how many surgeries did you end up having?
So I had 3 under general anesthetic, and we kind of lost count, but it would have been around 20 under local, like casual surgeries where I'd just go in, they'd scoop out some stuff. And because of the like necrotic tissue and whatnot, the local anesthetic actually didn't work. So most of those surgeries, I could feel everything.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine what that pain would have been like.
It wasn't fun.
No. What got rid of it finally in the end?
Well, I was on some super strong antibiotics. So that's kind of what killed it. And in the end, it was mostly just about like scooping out all the dead stuff. So it was like the antibiotics that got rid of the bacteria.
Your experience prompted you to lead a change.org petition to the then Federal Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, to gain support for research into Mycobacterium ulcerans. How did you go about this?
So basically, it wasn't something that I'd been thinking of, but I went into an appointment with the infectious diseases expert, Dan O'Brien, and he was saying that they had been trying to get funding from the government for their research for a really long time, and asked if I'd be willing to help out as like a case study example. And I was like, absolutely, no, like for sure. So I decided to make a change.org just because it's what's most effective. And I had a lot of help from my dad and stuff in terms of writing it and making sure that I had all the medical stuff right. And I didn't expect it to get the amount of support that it got. So I ended up getting over 15,000 signatures, which was absolutely crazy.
That is amazing. How did you spread the word?
I think mostly it was my mum put it on Facebook and all that. I wasn't huge on social media or any of that. But after we got one news article from, I think it was some online blog asking about it, then we got like a lot of attention from like 7 News and 9 News, and I had the 9 News show. That was when it really blew up and we got way more signatures.
And so how did it feel to, be garnering so much attention for your petition?
I was like really pleased. I didn't think many people would care that much. I thought, considering even though it is like prevalent, no one had really heard of it. I thought people would just be like, oh, it's just another like fear-mongering scheme or whatever. So I was super pleased, and I was really excited that it got the amount of attention that it got.
And it absolutely worked. In 2018, Minister Hunt announced funding for the Beating Buruli in Victoria project. How was that moment for you?
It was sort of unbelievable in a sense. At the time, I was 13. I had no idea how much money and what that would mean in terms of research. I just knew that, oh, cool. So like we did it. It was a success. But at the time, I really didn't comprehend how huge it was.
And now, many years later, what's it like knowing for you that we now have an answer to the mystery of how this bacteria that causes Buruli ulcer is transmitted?
It's great. When I initially contacted it, we had people asking, where do you think you got it from? Have you been to like this location, that location? And it was all across the peninsula. I'm like, yeah, like I live here. I've been to all of those spots that you've asked, and I have no idea how I got it. So the fact that now we know what it's from and how people can get it, it's great. It's really exceptional.
And how's your Buruli ulcer today?
It's much better. So I still have a decent sized scar on my knee, and that's never going to go away. But it took around 2 years for my complete mobility to come back in terms of bending and movement and all that. And I still get aches and pains, but I'm not entirely sure if they're related.
And to finish, what is one thing you'd say to people who don't know about this infection?
So I would say to read up on it. It's becoming more increasingly prevalent. And now that we especially know how that you can contract it from the mosquitoes, make sure to protect yourself. So using bug spray, mosquito repellent, because it's a terrible thing to get.
Ella, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks to all of you for listening to Infection and Immunity Evidence Explained, a Doherty Institute podcast. I'm very pleased to announce the winner of our Life as We Knew It book giveaway. Congratulations to Bill Rankin, who suggested we cover the topic, how do we diagnose and treat post-infection disease like long COVID, and how do we add this aspect to our future pandemic preparedness? Thank you, Bill, and we'll be sure to cover this in the weeks ahead. Like Bill, if there is a specific topic you would like us to cover, please get in touch with us by emailing doherty-media@unimelb.edu.au. That's doherty-media@unimelb.edu.au. If you've enjoyed our podcast, please rate and review on your favourite podcasting app and subscribe if you haven't already. The Doherty Institute is a joint venture between the University of Melbourne and the Royal Melbourne Hospital. See you next time.